This study examines the job demands resources model in relationship to psychosocial well-being, in, in this case, burnout and engagement. This study is a meta-analysis of all the longitudinal studies that have been conducted thus far using the job demands resources model. Within the meta-analysis, people are going to look into the literature and they look for all studies on a particular topic and try to summarize it using average statistics that summarize all the relationships that have been found. Within this study, it was a meta-analysis on all the longitudinal studies using the job demands resources model. So all studies that examine the job demands resources model over time, so comparing time one with or combining time one with time two, and there could be weeks, months, or even years between time one and time two. So what did they do? They examined all studies that examined job demands and job resources at time one and examined their relationships with burnout and engagement at time two. They also included studies that examined burnout and engagement along with job demands and job resources at time one, which then allowed to study whether burnout and engagement at time one have an impact on job demands and job resources at time two. This allows not only to examine the causal relationships from job demands and job resources to employee well-being, but also the reverse relationships from employee well-being to job demands and job resources. So it allows to examine the reciprocal relationships between job demands, job resources, burnout, and engagement. Examining relationships over time is as closely as we can get towards causality. So we would assume that if there is a relationship between the variables at time one and the variables at time two, while controlling for their relationships at one single point in time, we can prudently conclude that there is causality. Of course, this is not really the case. We are not really showing that there's a causal relationship between time one and time two. For that type of research, we would need interventions. But nevertheless, longitudinal research is considered strong evidence for relationships, as pointed out here in the job demands resources model. So what do the results show of this study examining the longitudinal relationships within the job demands resources model? Well, these authors could find 77 studies that examine the job demands resources model from a longitudinal perspective. About half of these studies were considered of high quality, and these are the results if you summarize each and every one of these studies. First, the results show that jobs are unlikely to change over time. Job demands and job resources are quite stable. This also means that burnout and engagement are quite stable over time. So if you feel really burned out, or to the contrary, if you feel really engaged, that's a good predictor of how you will feel over time. In support of the job demands resources model, however, we can also establish relationships from job demands and job resources to burnout and work engagement. Job demands are positively related to burnout over time. So that means if you have a lot of job demands today, you are likely to develop more burnout over time later in your working life. Job resources may decrease levels of burnout, and job resources may also contribute to work engagement over time. Interestingly, however, there's also some reverse relationships. Burnout may lead to the experience of job demands over time. So if you feel really exhausted now, you're more likely to see more job demands in your job later on in your working life. If you have a lot of burnout, you're less likely to see job resources at a later point in time. When you're work engaged, however, you will experience more job resources. So this study found quite some evidence for the job demands resources model, even if you examine the relationships over time and you meta-analyze all the relationships that have been found thus far. So this is actually quite strong evidence for the job demands resources model, predicting psychosocial well-being in terms of burnout and work engagement.